was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We got some
tied
patented
for
Pop
six.
Next Gen stats here.
Tied for 6th worst in the league.
Exactly, which is exactly where 27 is, right? And our over-under.
Not exactly.
Pop, how's it going, man?
I'm doing good, son. The question is, how are you? I mean,
I'm
AirPods
good,
in the ears, charged up. Are we good over there in LA?
I've lost these AirPods. I got a second here. I gotta have a talk with Apple. Apple, every time I get more than 15 feet away from my AirPods, I get a notification on my phone that I've left them behind. Yet somehow, when I open the Find My app to set off the noise, I don't get a noise. It doesn't even recognize the AirPods. So I don't know what's going on here. I'm all the way updated. I've got everything. I don't know what's going on here, but you guys got to figure this out. If
you got help, please, in the comments.
Yeah, I can't keep living like this.
I can't see him reach these stress levels anymore.
His AirPods
hurts my heart.
They just vanish, man. Just vanish. Anyways, I'm doing good, Pop. And you know what's doing even better is the Dom and Pop channel, man. Guys, thank you so much for the subscribers. Just a reminder, you probably already heard this, but we get new viewers every week. So just a reminder, we are doing a Jaden Daniels jersey giveaway to one of our 500 subscribers once we get to 500. So to enter the giveaway, hit that subscribe button and hit it fast because we're 20 subscribers away. So at the pace we've been moving, we might be shut down by the end of this week. So hit that subscribe button, and then after you hit that subscribe button, send an email to domandpopgiveaway1@gmail.com with your name, your address, your jersey size. I think that's it, right? That's all we need.
It.
That should be all we need. And then if you want to write a kind note, we've been really enjoying all the fan mail. It's been really cool to hear from you guys. So send those over, and then that should be it. And if you don't like listening, I don't know why you're listening to a podcast, but if you need those instructions repeated, go ahead and hit down in the pinned comment. The instructions will be down below.
Yeah, thanks so much for all the subs. This has been a great week. We said we needed less than 50 last week, and we're down to like 15, 16 more that we need to hit 500. So if you've been procrastinating sending that email in with your entry, make sure you do that. We've been getting a lot of entries, but a lot more subs than entries. So if you've been waiting to send that email in, do it quick, because once we hit 500, we're going to raffle off, and we'll be talking about the next giveaway, which more to come on that.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be, we're already shopping some quick rewards because, man, we said cut off by the beginning of the season. If we didn't get there, we're going to beat training camp.
That's it.
So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool, guys. Keep them coming in. And
we'll figure it out. We'll do a big announcement. Might be as soon as next week's pod. We'll do the raffle. We'll do a big announcement on the podcast, and then, of course, we'll reach out individually to the winner.
Yes, sir. What do you say we talk some ball, Pop?
We should.
All right. So this week, classic early July, 4th of July type podcast. Not a ton of news. So now we're starting to see teams, now that we have an idea of how things are shaping out, we're starting to see people kind of give their projections for what next year is going to look like. You start to have a kind of a clearer picture in your mind. So what we want to talk about today is, are people underestimating this 2024 Commanders team? Talk about a little bit like where our expectations are, what we think. So training camp is just 20 days away. And I think that is where we're going to have a much clearer picture. Of course, now guys are starting to hit. And I think for this team, the biggest thing that you're going to want to see is, what is Jaden Daniels looking like against that pass rush, right? That's the number one thing you want to see, is how is Daniels in the pocket? How is Daniels when he's at risk of getting hit? You know, you see all these crazy plays in OTAs where you go like, oh yeah, but that play was dead 4 seconds ago. You don't see that anymore in training camp. So I'm excited to kind of see how that shakes out. And I think that's going to be where people kind of start to set their expectations. But overall, something we're going to talk about later in the podcast, is that PFF has Washington rated 27th in the NFL for their roster. So just outside the bottom 5. So not so hot. Most have us rated bottom 4 or bottom 5, which is a little bit confusing, just given the kind of optimism that
Yeah.
a lot of people have had about Jaden Daniels. It's like these guys are getting on ESPN and singing the praises of Jaden Daniels and how amazing he's going to be. Well, if he lives up to that, this is just not going to be a bottom 4 or bottom 5 team in the NFL. That's just not how things usually work. So that's where things get interesting.
It's kind of crazy, right? Because you hear, you go through free agency and everybody's rating us at an A or A plus, or, you just hear a lot of people rank the free agency really high. And maybe that's about processes as much about players you're landing, because, it wasn't like we went out and got a bunch of big names, but a bunch of really good quality players. And then you go through the draft, same thing. Adam Peterson is a genius. Look at how he ran this draft, got really good value, fleeced the Eagles in a trade, all these things, all these picks, and you just hear nothing but great things. And then, Jaden Daniels, the buzz, we talked about it last week's pod. Thanks for the response on last week's pod for an off-season pod.
For sure.
That was fantastic. So people like the Jaden Daniels talk. But then it's just like consistently. And you go through that bottom 5, which I think you'll get into in a second here. Pretty consistent, those teams that are in that bottom 5. Different variations of that theme. But honestly, this PFF rank at 27 is one of the best I've seen of the Commanders, and it just doesn't seem to match. And I thought you had a great take, which I'll let you make in terms of where we were just a couple of years ago to where we are now. And it's interesting. I think one thing would be interesting to do right now, real quick, go through what PFF is projecting as our starting lineup, and that might feed into what we think is maybe an underrating at 27 here.
Yeah, so we're going to get into the whole PFF article in the second half of the podcast. But for now, let's just go through where they're projecting our starting lineup. So on offense, you've got Jaden Daniels, quarterback, of course, B-Rob and Austin Eckler at running back, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Luke McCaffrey at wide receiver, Zach Ertz at tight end, and then left tackle, Cornelius Lucas, left guard, Nick Allegretti, center, Tyler Biadasz, right guard, Samuel Cosme, right tackle, Andrew Wiley. So interesting there, the omission of Brandon Coleman, who I guess PFF is probably viewing as more of a developmental piece. That'll be another thing that in training camp, I think, should be interesting to see.
Still, I think.
Well, let's see. It should be interesting to see in training camp, but I have a take on that we can get into later. But defense, you've got Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Johnny Newton, Dorrance Armstrong, Cleveland Farrell all on the defensive line. Obviously, Allen, Payne, Newton, interior guys, and then Armstrong and Farrell on the edges. And then you've got Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu at linebacker. I think Frankie Louvu will also contribute on the edge a little bit there. And then Benny St. Juste, Emmanuel Forbes, Mikey Sanistrell at corner, and Jeremy Chin and Derek Forrest. Now, I'm
not sure Forbes is going to crack that starting lineup.
Was just about to say, I guarantee you Emmanuel Forbes is not starting outside week 1. Barring a training camp where they go, holy crap, this kid looks like Deron Bland, I don't see him starting on the outside week 1. I don't see it.
Probably going to be the kid from San Diego, right?
Yeah. Williams? No, not Williams. Not his name. Davis. Michael Davis.
Michael Davis. There you go. Good pull.
Yeah, I always think about Mike Williams when I think the Chargers are. That's why it's the first name I always think of. But yeah, so that's that situation. That's the starting lineup, and I think this is where you gotta I should be wearing my Ashburn Syndrome T-shirt here, but this is where you gotta take the zoom out and look on the national scale, right? We're obviously hype's at an all-time high right now. I was talking with my Jets insider earlier this week. And we were saying, yeah, this is the best time of the year to be an NFL fan because hype's at an all-time high. And then, 4 games into the season or 4 plays into the first game of the season, it can all come crashing down like what happened to Rodgers last year.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think hype is at an all-time high right now. And I think optimism is warranted, but I think we're a little overly optimistic when you look at a league wide view. You take a zoom out. A lot of these guys are unproven guys across the league. If you look at the starting lineup, I mean, if you look at like a Benjamin St. Juste, in the eyes of the rest of the league, that's a nobody. That's just a guy. If you look at you know, Nick Allegretti in the eyes of the rest of the league, that was a Kansas City backup that's getting a chance to start. You don't know if he's going to be anything. If you look at a Sam Cosme in the eyes of the rest of the league, that's a solid right guard, but probably our best player on offense right now. And that's still not a guy that's a guy that could take the next step, but hasn't yet. So I think it's not. I'm not mad at where we're ranked, given when you take that zoomed out approach and you look across the league and you look at like Allen and Payne had a really down year last year, and they're some of our premier talent. Like that's kind of where my head's at. How do you feel about it, Pop?
I don't know. When I look at that roster, I just, you go through it and you look at Robinson, Neckler, you got to like that combination. We talked about the need for Jahan Dotson and that receiver group to step up, but certainly possible, right? He's a guy that this coaching staff appears to be very high on. We hear about his great route running and speed and all those other things. Supposedly great hands. Didn't have the greatest year with his hands last year. McCaffrey's interesting, but I still think there's some guys in depth there at receiver that could make some contributions as well too. Ertz, if he's healthy, I think he's going to be a really strong contributor. Maybe it's a big hit at his age. Yeah, you're going to be concerned about the offensive line. I'm not going to try to sell you on Cornelius Lucas or Andrew Wiley. That group as a whole is a concern, no question about it. But then I talked about it before. I really like that defense. I like the defensive line. I think that, you talk about people say the edge is the weakness, and it's coming off of, losing our two starting edges from last year. But how great were those guys as Commanders? They were okay. They weren't great. And I think that Dorrance Armstrong and Cillian Fair, I know I butchered that name, Clellian Farrell, are pros. I think they're really good. And I think there's some really good backups. Maybe they're not elite, but I think these guys are solid players. And with the strength of that interior with the three guys there, I think that there's something to look forward to. I think that front seven is really going to be, a strength of this team. I'm kind of tipping off something that I'm going to do later in the pod. Yeah, there's some concern at secondary, but did some really good free agent ads there and some good ads through the draft. You look at a guy like Mikey Sanistro and what he might be able to bring to the table and where he's been talked about. I would say, it's interesting with this starting lineup because I don't think we're going to start Payne, Allen, and Johnny Newton all together. We're not going to go 5 linemen as a starting lineup. I think Jordan McGee is kind of being left off here, and he's somebody I think that could be contributing. Certainly there's Jamin Davis too, who's kind of a bit of a mystery man. There was even some buzz about does he even make this roster. But yeah, it's interesting just in general, the general idea of, is this the 27th best team in the league? Is this a 4 or 5, 6 win team again this year? I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it to me. It feels like this team is going to be more competitive than that to me.
Yeah.
It really does. I'm not predicting a playoff team, but I think, it's closer to that 7 win, and that's going to be much higher than 27th in the league. Yeah, I think they've put together a competitive roster here.
Well, you want to talk about omissions, and this kind of like feeds back to my original point of like these are guys that we know what they're capable of, and we know that the problem last year, that was not a 4-13 team talent wise. That was a 4-13 team at certain key positions like offensive line and quarterback and defensive end, but that was not a 4-13 team talent wise, top to bottom, and certainly not a team that would have that record under a normal year with a coaching staff that had not quit after week 4. That's the bottom line. That's what
coming
happened.
Off of an 8-1 season too, with horrendous quarterback play
Yeah.
in that season as well, right?
Yeah, you had a dead man walking a coach, and you had a locker room full of players who knew that. And at the end of the day,
exactly.
it's an incredibly violent sport. You're going to go out there and give 110% and risk your life for somebody that you know is not going to doesn't care and is not going to matter to you in a matter of weeks. It's hard to. I understand why things fell apart last year. Anybody
And
can
the
see it.
and the we spent enough time on last year, but it wasn't just Ron. It was the Eric Bieniemy experiment just
Disaster.
didn't work, and it's part of that 1 year experiment. So yeah, they lost the locker room. You're absolutely
Yep.
right. The coaching
But
staff lost the locker room.
besides that, speaking
I
of
mean, defensive
omissions,
coordinator gets fired mid-season. Like, I mean, it was a disaster.
yeah, it was a mess. But you're looking at on the defense. I think of course, I don't think we're going to start three in the interior, though. I do think you could see them go to that Cinco package from time to time with the talent
Yeah.
they have there. I think you're going to see Johnny Newton not start, and I think you're going to see Quan Martin on the field there, and Jeremy Chin down in that almost like second slot Buffalo nickel kind of like box safety role. That's what I think. We'll see. But yeah, Quan Martin, I think, is the key omission there on the defense.
Well,
And
they
that's a
list
guy
12
that,
starters on offensive defense, so they're obviously counting for like third down back and rotation
yeah,
with the defensive line. But interesting, they only had two linebackers there. It's kind of wild.
yeah, I think that is wild. But yeah, we should see. It was a good take on Jordan McGee there, Pop.
But does it upset you? Like, is this being ranked 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th? I've seen us hit the 30s. I mean, it just seems kind of nuts. I don't mind it personally because I'd rather that be bulletin board material for the team. But this doesn't feel like we went over the whiz a little bit last year. And I know it's a rebuild, but is it a tank year in your mind?
No.
Yeah,
No, they're not in that position. They're not in that position. I think last year was a tank year. And I think last year
it turned into one.
I think it worked out perfectly that last year was so nuclear given the quarterback draft class and who we ended up with. The worst thing that could have happened last year is we went like 10-7 and we want to keep Ron around and give Sam Howell a second shot. That would have been a disaster. But no, I don't think this is a tank year this year. I think this is much closer to like, I keep comping them, but I really think this is the 2022 Jaguars. I think this is a team that you're not going to want to see at the end of the season that's going to come on hot, be a really tough out. They might not make the playoffs, but look at like the Jaguars in 2022 and look at the Lions the year before last year, I guess in 2022 as well. Both teams, really tough outs, had some really key strengths, but just weren't fully completed and rounded out yet, but you could see where they were headed. I think
but is it a little lazy of all these analysts to put us so low in the rankings?
A really tough out that wins 6 or 7 games. Yeah, at the end of the day, you're going to be 27-28 in the NFL.
I have to do the math on that.
I don't know. It doesn't bother me all that much because I can understand it from just a purely like football pundit perspective. Though I do think we will outperform that. I can understand why at this point in time, with all the talent across the NFL, you're a little more willing to give some other guys looks over the guys that we have right now. I get it.
All right. So 6 wins last year was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We got some
tied for
top
6
next gen stats here.
Tied for 6th worst in the league.
Exactly, which is exactly where 27 is, right? And our over-under.
Not exactly, but
that is exactly.
27th is 5th worst in the league.
It's 32, 31, 30, 29, 28.
Yeah, that's true.
Clip that for the Dom and Pop math highlights right there.
That's it.
But yeah, it's right about in line with our Vegas win total. And at the end of the day, something I just want to remind everybody
of. Fair.
Last year, we all laughed at the win total, right? We said, 6.5, that's absurd. Smash that. That's easy. I think I hammered like 5 units on the win total. My units are very small, so you still couldn't even get a meal from Five Guys with it. But I hammered like 5 units on the win total. And obviously that didn't work out, but we kept saying the only team with a worse win total than the Commanders is the Houston Texans, who are just abysmal. And I think Stroud is a great young player, but they might ruin him in Houston. We were saying that. Everybody was saying that. My God, what
Yeah.
a year can change, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, Pop, I'm ready to move on this
Yeah. Let's
segment. I
do
don't
it.
know if you got any other stuff you want to touch on here. We've been teasing this article. I say we
15 to
get into it.
25 and minute 20. We're rolling this week.
Yeah, we're breezing
You
through. We're
know,
doing
you
our
know.
15 to 25 before the 35th minute. Usually it's about 23, so we're a little ahead of schedule here.
That's it.
But yeah, let's get into it, guys. For the second segment today, we're talking NFL roster rankings across the NFL. So we're going to break down the top 10, I think, and then maybe kind of do it similarly to how we did the quarterbacks. Who might we move around, or how do we weigh it? And then we're going to see where the Commanders are and obviously discuss how we feel about that. So, you got
Yeah, we'll
anything,
get into a
Papa?
little more detail on the commander side. There's some interesting things. We're keying off this PFF article, so there's interesting things that they talk about, like X factors and rookies to watch, and what our strengths and weaknesses are. So we're going to definitely bounce some of that stuff off on where we think the Commanders are and how do we, what would it take to kind of make that 27 into a 15 to 20 or 15 to 25 in theme of our podcast. We'll see.
100%. So let's get into it here with the San Francisco 49ers at number one.
See a
That
lot of that.
is obvious. That is obvious, right? You can't be mad at that one. Number two, Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes there. Not much you can say about that. Number three, the Philadelphia Eagles.
That one I was
Four,
a little surprised by.
yeah, that's high. That's high, but they're always great on paper. Four, the New York Jets, which I was also surprised by.
That one
Five,
I'm really surprised by.
you got the Baltimore Ravens, which I'm also surprised by, but for the opposite reasons. Six, the Detroit Lions. Seven, the Houston Texans. Eight, the Cincinnati Bengals. Nine, the Dallas Cowboys. And 10, the Buffalo Bills. So, from this top 10, Pop, where are your initial reactions? You said you were surprised by a couple of things. Why don't you break those down for the people?
Yeah, I was surprised, definitely. I was surprised to see the Eagles that high. I would have had probably slide the Ravens into that slot, personally. I think that when you talk about rosters, the thing is that do you have superstars on your team? Do you have someone like Lamar that can carry you to wins, pretty much on his own offensively? Who is that guy necessarily on the Eagles, right? Maybe with Saquon, the addition to Saquon, that offense could be a lot more dynamic than it was even before, which was pretty darn dynamic. The Jets, I guess you just kind of get so wrapped up in the Aaron Rodgers talk that you forget about how good their defense is.
Yeah.
And some of those
Skill
other
position.
elements that they have in the skill positions. Seeing that roster ranked that high gives me a little bit of pause with where my mindset is on the Jets for the season.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't hate the Jets that high, to be honest with you. It surprised me, but then when you really look at it, you have Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Malachi Corley, who they just added, Tyler Conklin, all solid in terms of receiving options there. And then you have Breece Hall at running back, who's the top probably three, maybe top five running back in the league projected for next year, and has shown incredible flashes. And that defense is just suffocating, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they are just fantastic. They've got the best cornerback in the game probably since the last great Jets cornerback in Sauce Gardner. That kid is just unbelievable. And they're great at safety. Their worst player in the secondary would improve Washington's secondary from last year by like 2 wins. Like they're loaded on defense. And the fact that the Jets have consistently won 6-7 games with the awful quarterback play that they've had from Zach Wilson and the rest of the cast over the last couple of years really shows, I think, how good they've been
Who's
on
their
the rest of the
backup
roster.
QB?
This year, I don't know. Mike White. Did they keep? No, he went to Miami. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm sure our might have to call in our Jets insider on that one. I have no idea. They might have drafted a kid to sit behind Rodgers. I think that's possible.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think Philly at
Deshaun
3.
Watson. No, Deshaun Watson's with the Browns.
Sure as hell ain't Deshaun Watson.
It sure as hell ain't Deshaun Watson.
Getting paid $64 million a year to sit behind. All right, I'm going to keep it moving here, Pop, while you're looking up
Go,
very
go, go.
important nugget information. Eagles at 3, I think, is exactly right. Honestly, I don't think that's too high. The roster's not the problem there. It's the coaching. It's the fact that they lost Shane Steichen. It's the fact that they lost the locker room last year. And it's the fact that Jalen Hurts might, who knows, might have been a little too fast to crown Jalen Hurts NFL MVP after 1 year. That's all I'm saying. Might be a little fast. Might be a little fast for Hurts. I still think he's a great player, but I mean, this is an Eagles team that just continues. You want to talk about a great general manager and Howie Roseman? I mean, just continues to get better and better and better every offseason, and somehow without sacrificing everything. Obviously, they lost Jason Kelsey, so let's see how that offensive line responds without the brain trust there at center. But that's a big piece there. Tyrod Taylor is the Jets' backup, and they did draft another young man. I know in like the
fifth
late round.
Florida State kid. Yep.
There you go. Yeah, the kid that he's actually good. He tore his ACL. That's probably why he fell further. But Tyrod Taylor, Jets backup. So there you go. Pop got the answer for us. But yeah, the Ravens, I think initially this felt low, but the more I'm talking about it, here's my issue with the Ravens, man. They just lack at skill position. They lack at 2 really key positions, which is cornerback and wide receiver. And I think those are 2 of the top 5 positions in the NFL. You know they're going to be good in the trenches. Ravens are always good in the trenches. You know the defense is going to be solid. Ravens always have a solid defense. You know Lamar Jackson is going to stand on his head and make plays that nobody else in the NFL can make. Kyle Hamilton is obviously.
I mean, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, Shad Bateman, and then Bateman's you've got the combination of Derrick Henry and Jackson in the backfield.
Bateman is not a good football player, Dad. Bateman is bad. Bateman is.
I was trying to just slide him. I was trying to slide him in there.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is like, look, we live in the golden age of the
receivers specifically, but I mean, Mark Andrews is a weapon.
Sure,
he's a top 5 tight end.
Mark Andrews is maybe a top. Yeah, is a top 3 tight end when he's healthy. Yeah. He can't stay healthy. That's the problem with Andrews. But I think this is just about right. I don't think I can justify putting them above the other teams. The Jets' defense is better. Just is. The Eagles just have more skill. I mean, when you're looking at A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith as your wide receiver duo, those are 2 of the top 10 receivers in the league on the same team.
I got the Ravens 3.
That's nasty. I think I'm not mad at that, but because of my concerns at receiver and corner that just you don't have with these other teams.
But if we go too quickly, I think the Lions at 6, a bit of a surprise. They're kind of considered by many top 2 in the NFC.
Yeah.
Houston at 7. Wow, you just said it, man. 3-13 to a playoff team. That seems high.
This one I don't like.
I don't
like. I don't like Houston at 7. I think it's just too high for them. I think this is a recency bias just because of how awesome Stroud has been. And this is just an amazing demonstration of how a star quarterback can elevate a team. Yes, Stroud has taken what would have been an abysmal team out of misery. And all of a sudden, Nico Collins is a household name now, right? Nobody was talking about Nico Collins before C.J. Stroud went there. Now he's a household. So I think this is way too high for the Texans. Personally, they're great. They have some great players like Laramie Tunzel is great, but that left guard position is miserable. The rest of the line is very questionable. And then you look on their defense, and it's like Stingley has been okay, not great. hasn't quite lived up to being drafted that high. Jimmy Ward is obviously a solid player. Jalen Petru's a solid player.
And you got teams like the Dolphins, the Browns, who have a really good roster. You know, just outside the top, just outside 11 and 12. Green Bay Packers at 13. Who've got a really good team overall. So yeah, it's interesting how they're doing these rankings. Even the Los Angeles Rams at 14, which would kind of round out the top 14 for the playoffs. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure about the Cowboys either. Number 9, like definitely a lot of talent on that roster. Give them credit where credit's due.
Yeah,
but they didn't seem to do a whole lot. They lost a couple pieces. Didn't seem to do a whole lot to upgrade it. I think they're just kind of hanging on to that number 9 spot.
I actually think that's low for the Cowboys. I think my concerns about the Cowboys have nothing to do with the roster and everything to do about coaching. Because all right, you lost Dan Quinn, who masterminded that whole thing. What does it look like there now? All right, that's pretty much my biggest concern with Dallas is what does it look like without Dan Quinn.
But you talk about weapons, right? You got CeeDee Lamb, big name, right? But they've got Zeke Elliott and Rico Dowdle noted as their starting running backs. Who's Rico Dowdle?
Yeah,
right. After CeeDee Lamb, you got Brandon Cooks and Jalen Tolbert as your wide receivers. Is this roster really that good?
CeeDee Lamb is a top 3 receiver in the league, man.
But he's the only one, and they don't have a running back.
I think. Well, look at the defense. You've got
they lost their starting center.
You've got Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, DeMarcus Lawrence, Deron Bland.
They got to score some points.
Malik Hooker. They've got a fantastic. They're going to score points. They got Zach Martin at right guard. Like they've got.
They're not my top 10. Man.
They're
not my top 10.
Jake Ferguson's a good tight end. That is a burgundy and gold take. Not putting Dallas in the top 10 rosters in the NFL. That's just a straight burgundy and gold take, which I love. I think
that offense is weak.
You want to bet who finishes with more total offense this year?
No.
I don't want to root for the Cowboys, so I kind of don't want to do it. But I guarantee you the Cowboys will be top 5 in total offense this year. They always are. Let's move on. Let's talk Commanders. Speaking of burgundy and gold takes. So we wanted to key in on a couple parts from this article on the Commanders here. Specifically, we wanted to talk about what we think our biggest strength for 2024 is, our biggest weaknesses, and just kind of project. They talk about in this article, they talk about what the biggest strengths and weaknesses were last year. So we want to project what we think it's going to be coming up. So, Pop, what do you think our biggest strength of 2024 is going to be if you're projecting?
Yeah, maybe just to recap what PFF said there, just because we're kind of keying off of it, right? So for last year, they said that our biggest strength was our rushing offense.
Which is hilarious because we didn't run the ball. But
I don't want to just nuke the credibility of this article, but I'm not sure about that. But I guess they're just maybe projecting that Brian Robinson and Chris Rodriguez were bright spots when they got the chance to run the ball.
And Antonio Gibson.
It was hard to find. Hard to find a strength here. 15th, they were ranked 15th in rushing grade by PFF, yet we never ran the ball.
When we did run the ball, Pop, go back and watch the tape from our post-game recaps. When we did run the ball, we ran the ball super well. We just couldn't, we just didn't do it.
Run defense they have as our biggest weakness, which is incredible to think if you think about, what we thought going into the year. So, but you were asking me what I think our biggest. Which one do you want me to do first? Weakness, strength? I forget already.
You pick.
All right. For me, I think our biggest weakness is obvious. I'll do both real quick, and I'll let you do both. Biggest weakness is obvious. It's offensive line, right? That's the biggest concern. We rattled off the depth chart there. I mean, if you just look through it and you think Cornelius Lucas is your starting left tackle. I like Cornelius Lucas. He's put in some good shifts for us, but he's a backup. and he's in his 31. It's crazy to think that he's our best option at left tackle. I've heard of them maybe thinking about bringing Leno back, or there's some opinions out there that we should think about it. We need somebody else, I think, personally, as far as, adding some depth. Nick Allegretti, again, has been a backup yet for the Chiefs. The Tyler Biada's great pickup, I think, there. Sam Cosmi, a lot of people are really high on that. Andrew Wiley, wasn't great last season, so I think our biggest weakness is obvious. But I really like our front seven. Our biggest strength for me is our front seven on defense. I am really high on what we've done at linebacker. I won't rattle off the names. We've talked about some of these guys earlier. And I think edge is sneakily a lot better just in terms of the shift of guys that we can throw in there. I like Armstrong. I think Lillian Fairler is a former top 5 pick in the NFL. Clearly is some talent there. They've added enough guys there in the mix, and I think that rotation on defensive line is going to be really good. Potentially, borderline very good to elite in that interior if they ball out. And then we talked about linebacker with Luvu and Wagner and others. I think that front seven is our strength, personally.
Yeah, that's a good take. I think for me, I think the weakness of the team next year, you do have to say it's going to be the offensive line. Though I do think they will outperform expectations, because I think
agree with that.
More than Pop, we're not going to argue about it, but I weigh the failures of the offensive line a little bit more on the quarterback holding the ball and the scheme being bad rather than the actual players we dealt with last year.
I'd personally agree with that. I'd agree with that.
Just because we saw under a different quarterback and a different scheme,
you let the defense pin their ears back and rush you, and didn't allow the offensive line to attack. So I completely agree with that statement.
Yeah, Trent Williams is going to struggle under that circumstance. Like, you're putting guys in bad positions. You've got a quarterback out there who can't identify protections. You've got a center who's not helping him identify protections. Disaster. Just a disaster. So anyways, I do think you have to say offensive line. Like, that's the chalk answer. I do worry about cornerback as well.
That'd be next on the list.
I don't know that you have an alpha in that secondary, and that makes me really uncomfortable. Now, the reason why I'm not picking cornerback as what I think will be our biggest weakness is because we do have the 2 defensive back whisperers historically in the NFL with Joe Witt Jr. and Dan Quinn at the helm, and they have made much more out of much less in their careers. So I think you might see a guy like Derek Forrest end up with 6 interceptions by the end of the year. You might see a guy like Quan Martin turn into the heart of the defense.
Davis.
You might see a guy like Michael Davis take the next step, I have a little bit more faith in what the coaching can do to make up for that lack of name brand. I think, I'm planting my flag. I think Benjamin St. Juste is going to be a guy that we're talking about having to re-sign next year. We got to keep Benny St. Juste in the building. I'm planting my flag. I think that's how we're going to feel.
And let's hope. I think we're all really down on Emmanuel Forbes for good reason. Yeah. And let's just hope that he was projected first-round pick. We picked him a little higher than most people thought. There were other options at that spot that maybe you go back and think. But let's hope. I'm not overly optimistic. I've got to see it. But let's hope this coaching staff can get first-round talent out of Emmanuel Forbes.
I'm going to stay optimistic with you and not talk about why the Emmanuel Forbes projected first-round draft pick thing really grinds me, because it's just not the whole picture, and it's a very burgundy and gold take. But I'm good to keep. I'm
just going off what I read on the internet. It can't be wrong.
He was a projected first-round pick because you thought Christian Gonzalez was going to go like number 8 overall. The cornerback position got punted all the way down the draft board in that draft. He was not supposed to get drafted ahead of the guys he got drafted ahead of. Anyways.
Doesn't change the fact that he was projected first-round pick before the draft. Later in the first round.
He was not a projected first 5 cornerbacks off the board, and he was the second.
The Emmanuel Forbes podcast will be a couple episodes
next week. Yeah, keep it moving. So biggest Pop, remember when we said this episode was going to be only 30 minutes in the setup? No shot. We'll be here for another 20.
More for the
Biggest,
people. More for the people.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. This is always fun to be on here chopping it up. So we talked about our biggest weakness. Now, what do we think our biggest strength is going to be next year? You said front seven. I don't think I gave mine. I'm going to go ahead and say I think it's going to be the skill positions. I think it's going to be our weapons.
I like that.
I think it's going to be our biggest strength. I think Zach Ertz might surprise people. And don't get me wrong, I think surprise people for Zach Ertz is like 780 yards and like 4 touchdowns. But I think he still has something left. I think Eckler has something left. And I think he's going to surprise people as well. And I also think Jahan Dotson, if Jahan Dotson is the guy, is who we thought he was, and he shows us, this offense is going to explode. And I think the skill position players are going to get to really eat off that.
My only question about Eckler and Ertz are strength. I think those two guys got something that you really love to see. They got a chip on their shoulders. They got that battery sitting there. That's a 70s reference for your old heads like me. They're daring people to knock it off. You know, if you know, you know. You have no idea what I'm talking about. We're not going to go there. But no, I think they got a chip on their shoulder. I think those guys feel like people are writing them off, and I think they're going to both be. And I tell you what, we're going to get there on wins predictions. But if that skill position team, which I'd love to hear from you as a strength, there's no way it's less than 6.5 wins.
Well,
if that comes true, there's no way it's less than 6.5 wins.
And we're taking out the obvious answer here, right? Because if I do say skill positions are the greatest strength, well, who's throwing the ball to the skill positions? It's going to be Jaden Daniels. He had a good year, and obviously he's going to be the best thing about the team. We're taking that out.
Speaking of that, X factor in this article is Jaden Daniels. Just move us along a little bit here.
Yeah.
I think that's an easy one. It's Jaden Daniels, right? He's the X factor. I think we got to agree with that. Yeah. There's not going to be any argument there.
No two ways about that one.
And that makes a lot of sense because we're going to probably go as far or as not as far as he takes us. I mean, obviously other guys got to step up. They got to play well. We can't depend on him to put us on back and be Superman here. We can't. If we try to attempt that, that's a high risk move. And I don't think this coaching staff is going to do that. But
yeah, I as well agree. I think it's definitely Jaden Daniels is the X factor that's just, I mean, Jaden Daniels will determine single-handedly how we're feeling about this team at the end of the year. It just is reality. It's just the reality of the situation. I don't know, unless Sam Hartman's the next Brock Purdy, but God forbid.
Slinging Sammy's so odd. I don't hate it as our backup.
Sammy Ball just rolls over in his grave every time you say he's singing Slammy, and you refer to these guys. I mean, the greatest Washington football player ever. Anyways, what else we got here? Probably the X Factor. So some rookies that we want to keep an eye on. This is a good time for my Brandon Coleman take. If Brandon Coleman can start at left tackle, Cornelius Lucas is a swing tackle. You can bump him out to the right, and you can get Wiley's ass off the field. Or if you need help at left guard, you can put Wiley in at left guard. I think if Brandon Coleman is the number one rookie to watch on this team, because if he's ready to start and if he emerges as even just a top, 8 to 15, even if he's just in that 8 to 15 range of left tackle, he is going to cure such a big problem for this team.
Brandon Coleman is your rookie to watch? Is that what I'm
100%. That's the biggest rookie to watch for me.
I think in terms
other than Daniels, of course.
I think in terms of if he hits, that would be the biggest story if he hits, right? I mean, I agree with you there. But I think Brandon Coleman is still a developmental piece. My reality in terms of just being realistic about a Brandon Coleman pick and the number of offensive tackles that went in front of him in this draft is I think he's got a lot of that, the measurables that you want to see, but I think he's a developmental piece. My rookie to watch now, PFF picks Johnny Newton, which you can't hate. If he's healthy, I think he's a first-round talent.
Yeah,
he's going to be big for us. But I would go with Sanistro, Mikey Sanistro, because I think got to remember Nick Saban saying pound for pound he was the best player in this draft. We talked about the need at cornerback, and we didn't even talk about Mikey Sanistro. I think this guy is a baller. I heard Dan Quinn in a film breakdown, some of the shows that the Commanders put out on YouTube, which are great to watch, talking about Mikey Sanistro and that he's what we want in a commander. Just this toughness, but his ability to also to guard, tight ends as well as some skill position guys at the receiver position. I think he's going to be the guy we're talking about the most. So it's a prediction when it comes down to, in terms of rookies. I'm really high on what we can get there, and that could be a huge boost to our secondary.
Yeah, I agree. I think he could really take that next step. I've got my eyes more on Quan Martin and Benny St. Juste right now, just because I've seen what they can do, and I want to see if we can make the most of it. Especially St. Juste, just the physical tools there that you have with him, with his size and his speed. But we'll have to see, man. I think it's going to be good. I do think I think you're a little low on Brandon Cole, but we'll see. But
I'd love to see it. I think he's got great talent. I'm just not sure it's ready for prime time.
He was playing through. He had a year similar to Jonathan Allen last year, where he was kind of playing through one of those nagging injuries that wasn't enough to take him off the field, but was enough to really not make his performance so great. And he was much better the year before.
If a guy that is a starting left tackle in the NFL for this year slipped to the third round, or was it second round? Was he picked in the second? Third, fourth. I mean, there's a lot of GMs are going to have a lot of explaining to do. I find it just hard. It just feels like a reach to me.
Best football player to ever live went 199.
Was he the best football player that ever lived in year one?
It became that very quickly. But it's okay. Yeah. It's all good. It's all good.
I hope you're right.
I hope you're right. Hating on the boy.
I'm not hating on him. I'm not hating on him. I think he's more of a developmental guy.
We're talking about rookies to watch because I think that's what could have the biggest impact if he hits right away. I
respect it.
Anyways, let's move on here. Talking the over-under win total. PFF, I think, took under. They did take under. I'm looking at it now.
Brandon Coleman was round 3, by the way.
Oh, it must have been our last pick in round 3. It was probably
first pick in round 3.
All right, well, good for you. Yeah. I forgot. Even better then. Over-under win total. PFF takes us under. They said while it wouldn't be surprising to see the Commanders approach or even surpass this win total, they are still starting a rookie quarterback and need immense improvement on defense.
Under 6.5, yep.
This season is more about Daniels and the rest of the rookie class progressing than it is about any number of victories. I fully agree with that sentiment. I do think I'm just a little bit more optimistic about Daniels progressing, but I think that 6.5 number is just about right. Now, here's something interesting. Do we see that 6.5 number move? I'm taking over for the record right now. You put that number at 7.5, now it starts to get weird. So do we see that number move as training camp goes and as some preseason games go and as we start to see Jaden Daniels in a Commander's uniform?
I think this team exceeds expectations this year, but slightly. I think it's 7 to 8 wins. I'll stick with that. That's what I've been saying all along. It's banking on, I think, more so than any other reason that's due to coaching. Because I think you've got, talent there. You talked about Brandon Coleman, of course, Jaden Daniels, and some of these other rookies that we're really high on. I think they're going to get coached up. They're going to get coached up properly. They're going to be a run-first team. They're going to be a very physical defense. And you said it, late in the season, they're not going to be a team, health permitting, that people are going to want to play. So I'm going to say over.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going over as well. Although I do think even if they only win 6 games, I think everything that you said just may not materialize in wins and losses quite yet. And I kind of don't care, but I do think they will.
No, the wins and losses are less important this season than the process and the development and what you see and how competitive the team is. You don't want to see what we saw at the end of last year where they just weren't competitive.
And you know what? Not to be this guy, but you win 6 games and you pick number 8, there's probably a pretty good left tackle you can get there.
Better than number 8, according to my math earlier.
Better at number 8 than in the third round.
No, I said
right?
better than number 8.
Oh,
Yeah.
better than number 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, true. I guess that would put us at
6 or 7.
But anyways, what do you say we wrap this thing up, Pop? Our famous, we get it done in under 30 minutes, and here we are an hour later podcast.
More content for the people.
Yes, sir. It's always fun. We love chopping it up with you guys. Guys, don't forget about the subscriber giveaway. It'll be the chapter will be down at the bottom, so go back, watch that, watch the whole episode again while you're at it. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the pinned comment for the giveaway details. Let's wrap this thing up. I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
Thanks for another great week, everybody.